Let's start with one that surprises a lot of people. You know, some woodworking tools look absolutely incredible when you see them in the store or in the pages of a glossy catalog. They promise laser straight cuts, perfect corners, or revolutionary speed. But here's the thing. More often than I care to admit, those tools end up sitting on my shelf, gathering dust, while the tried and true basics do all the hard work. If you've ever felt that pang of regret after an impulse buy, trust me, you're not alone. Today, I'm breaking down 5 woodworking tools I regret buying, and more importantly, I'll share the simple, reliable alternatives that have become my real shop staples. If you're building out your shop, or maybe you just want to avoid wasting money on tools that don't live up to the hype, this video could honestly save you hundreds of dollars and a lot of frustration. I want you to get the most out of your woodworking journey without filling your space and your budget with stuff you'll never use. So, let's dive in and talk about the tools I wish I'd skipped and what I reach for instead every single time. This one gets a lot of attention in woodworking circles, the cheap laser-cut miter gauge upgrade. You see it online or hanging on the wall at your local hardware store, promising dead-on accuracy for your table saw crosscuts. I fell for it, thinking it would be a quick way to up my precision game. But what they don't tell you is that if your miter slots have even a whisper of slop, these gauges just won't hold their setting. Every time you lock it in and think you're set, there's a little wiggle. And in woodworking, that little wiggle means a lot. I spent more time fiddling with set screws, shimming the bar, and double-checking angles than actually making cuts. It was frustrating, especially when my expensive upgrade made my results less consistent than before. There's nothing more discouraging than seeing your miters off by just enough to ruin a frame. Eventually, I shoved that miter gauge into a drawer and went back to basics. Enter the humble cross-cut sled. Sure, it takes a little time to build, but the result is rock solid. My sled rides perfectly in the slots, and every cut is square and repeatable. No more second guessing. No more trying to make it work with a fancy gadget. If you're tempted by one of those miter gauge upgrades, my honest advice is to skip it. Invest your time in a well-built crosscut sled, maybe even make it a weekend project. It'll serve you for years, and deliver the accuracy those upgrades promise, but don't deliver. Corner clamps are one of those tools that look like a magic fix for box making or cabinet assembly. I bought a whole set, thinking I'd finally get those perfect 90-degree corners every time. No more fiddling, just clamp and go. But in practice, things didn't work out that way. The promise is perfect alignment, but the reality is that wood moves, and even the slightest shift in the clamp throws everything out of square. I found myself wrestling with the clamps more often than actually assembling my project. If the boards weren't perfectly milled, or if there was just a little flex, the clamps would either pinch too tight or not tight enough. And when you tighten them, the pressure often causes the wood to shift, especially if you're working solo. It was a constant battle, and the time-saving clamps ended up slowing me down. Eventually, I ditched the corner clamps and went back to basics. Now, I rely on a couple of good bar clamps and a sturdy machinist's square. I lay my pieces flat, align them by hand, and clamp carefully. It's a little slower maybe, but the results are so much more reliable. Plus, I don't have to work around the awkward bulk of the corner clamps themselves. If you want square assemblies, a solid square and some patience will get you there every time. Those big corner clamp sets? They're just taking up space in my drawer now. Don't let them take up space in yours. Pocket hole joinery is everywhere these days, especially if you're building furniture fast. So when I came across a budget pocket hole jig kit, I figured, why not? The price was right, the marketing was slick, and it looked like a shortcut for solid hidden joints. But the reality? That cheap jig turned out to be more trouble than it was worth. No matter how carefully I set it up, the holes were inconsistent. Sometimes the bit would wander or the stop collar would slip, and I'd end up with weak, misaligned joints. I tried clamping in every which way, but the plastic flexed under pressure, and the results were never trustworthy. There's nothing worse than a chair or a cabinet that wobbles because the joinery failed. After too many failed projects, I put the jig back in its box and started looking for alternatives. Sometimes I'll use a simple drill guide for straight holes, or I'll fall back on classic joinery, like dowels or mortise and tenon. And when I do need pocket holes, I invest in a high-quality jig that's solid and precise. The difference is night and day. Bottom line, don't cut corners with cheap joinery tools. A little extra investment, or just a return to traditional joinery, will give you strength and reliability every time. I'm a sucker for a new sanding gadget, especially when they promise a perfect finish in half the time. Over the years, I've tried all sorts of massive sanding attachments, rollers, multi-head sanders, even some that looked like they belonged in a car wash. The pitch is always the same. Better, faster, dust-free sanding, but every time I brought one of those bulky tools into the shop, I ended up regretting it. The attachments were heavy, hard to maneuver, and usually left swirl marks or uneven surfaces. They clogged up fast, and cleaning them was a chore. Instead of making sanding easier, they made it a whole lot more complicated, and honestly, more frustrating. I wasted more time fixing the mess than actually finishing my projects. I finally realized that my trusty random orbital sander paired with a smart grit progression beats all those gadgets hands down. It's lightweight, easy to control, and with the right paper, it leaves a silky smooth finish. No more fussing with weird attachments or struggling to reach tight spaces. If you're tempted by the latest sanding gizmo, save your money. Focus on mastering the basics with a good orbital sander. The results will speak for themselves, and your finish will be better than ever, without all the drama. Last up is the cheap digital angle gauge copy. You see them all over the internet. Tiny, magnetic, and promising precise angle readings for your saw blades or jointers. I picked one up, thinking it'd be a game changer for dialing in perfect bevels and miters. But the reality? These cheap gauges just aren't reliable. Every time I turned it on, I'd get a slightly different reading, even when nothing had moved. The magnets were weak, the display would flicker, and sometimes the measurement would drift for no reason at all. It's one of those tools where you end up double-checking it with something else every single time, which totally defeats the purpose. There's nothing worse than trusting your angle, making a cut, and realizing the gauge was off by a degree or two. So, I went back to the basics here too. My old machinist's square and a quality analog angle gauge never let me down. They don't need batteries, and they don't lie. When accuracy really matters, I trust the tools that have stood the test of time and heavy use. If you're thinking about grabbing one of those cheap digital angle gauges, I'd say hold off. Save up for something dependable, or stick with the classic squares that have worked for generations. There you have it, 5 woodworking tools I regret buying, and the simple, dependable alternatives that have earned a permanent place in my shop. If you're just getting started, or even if you've been at this a while, I hope this list helps you avoid some of the pitfalls and expensive mistakes I've made over the years. Remember, sometimes the simplest tool is the best tool for the job. Now, I want to hear from you. Which tool do you think is the most overrated woodworking tool on the market right now? Drop it in the comments, because the answers might save other woodworkers from making the same expensive mistakes. We're all in this together, and sharing what works, and what doesn't, makes us all better at the craft. And if you want to see the 5 tools that actually transformed my woodworking accuracy, check out the next video on the screen. Thanks for watching, and, until next time, keep making, keep learning, and don't be afraid to rethink what's on your bench.